Injuries suck. They hurt, they mess with your everyday life, they cost time and money, they increase injury risk in the injured area for the rest of your life, and most importantly, they force you to take time off from hard training, slowing down your gains. In short, injuries are not conducive to your pursuit of strength, so preventing them should be one of your top priorities. But how exactly do you do that? This video will be a comprehensive answer to this question, so get ready to take notes. Let's start this video off by defining what an injury is so you know what we're trying to prevent. In broad terms, an injury is physiological damage to the living tissue of your body, which can arise from various sources, strength and hypertrophy training being one of them, which is what this video is about. But why do they even occur? Injuries occur when the forces that are imposed on your body are higher than the forces that your body can handle. To illustrate this, imagine that you have a plank that can withstand 10 pounds of force before breaking in half. If you apply 5 pounds of force to it, it won't budge. If you apply 10 pounds of force to it, it'll start to bend. But if you apply more than 10 pounds of force to it, it'll break in half. In short, the plank is your body, and if you apply more force to it than it can handle, you'll get injured. To prevent this from happening, let's go over 5 different injury prevention mechanisms that you can use to experience as few injuries in your training career as possible. The first one on the list is safe lifting technique, which consists of many parts, so let's go over each one of them. The first part is a full and standardized range of motion. This is because when you use partial range of motion, you need to use more load than if you were to use full range of motion, which can increase the damage done to your body to a significant extent. To illustrate this, look at these 2 pull-up techniques and tell me which one will allow you to lift more weight. The first one, because it has a shorter range of motion. This may sound great at first because you're able to feel stronger by using it, but since you're probably not working out to feel strong but to actually be strong, you shouldn't cheat your way out of more gains and less risk of injury by sacrificing your range of motion just so you can lift more weight. This is because heavy weights damage your body a lot, and if using full range of motion means that you can use less weight, it's obviously the better choice from an injury prevention perspective. That's for the full range of motion. Now for the standardized range of motion. A standardized range of motion means that you use the same range of motion every time. This is because a lot of injuries happen when people expose their bodies to new ranges of motion under heavy loads. To illustrate this, imagine that you were doing dips to a 90-degree elbow angle for years and worked up to 10 reps with 100 pounds. Then you saw my video on how a larger range of motion equals more gains, so you decided to go below the 90-degree elbow angle with the same working weight that you used before. This is a surefire way of getting injured because your body is simply not used to that part of the range of motion, let alone with heavy weight plates hanging off your body. Instead, you should expose your body to new ranges of motion gradually and progressively increase the weight from there. In this case, this would result in you doing bodyweight dips with full range of motion and increasing the load only once they feel great. In short, don't do shit that your body is not used to with weights that are too heavy for you. The second part is a controlled eccentric. The eccentric part of a movement is the part where your muscles are lengthening, and if you don't control it, you impose really high forces on your body, increasing your risk of injury. This is because your muscles are essentially off during an uncontrolled eccentric, and when they turn back on to do the concentric, the change in direction applies such high forces that your likelihood of getting injured increases. Another downside of not controlling the eccentric is that you have to use more load to stay in your target rep range than if you were to control the eccentric, which increases your risk of injury by itself. To illustrate this, look at these 2 pull-up techniques and tell me which one is more injurious. The first one, because the eccentric is much faster, which imposes higher forces on your body and makes you use more weight on top of that. The third part is not cheating. Cheating means sacrificing proper technique just so you can lift more weight or squeeze out more reps. This is a problem because the only person you're cheating is yourself. There's no real benefit of using more weight or doing more reps than necessary, other than that you get to feel stronger than you actually are, which is not a valid reason to do it. Instead, stick to good technique, use only the load that's required for you to stay in your target rep range, and don't go past technical failure. From a stimulus to fatigue ratio perspective, it's much better to do an additional set with good technique than to grind out more reps with bad technique. In short, don't cheat, neither in your taxes nor your technique. And the fourth part is avoiding repeatedly painful positions. This sounds like a no-brainer, but I have to say it. If your elbow hurts when doing pull-ups, stop and figure out what's going on. It may be just because you're not warmed up properly, but it could also be because your elbow is actually injured. The way you can figure this out is by doing another set. If your elbow hurts less and less with each consecutive rep, you just didn't warm up properly. But if it hurts more and more with each consecutive rep, you should probably do something, otherwise you'll get injured. This something could mean doing a different exercise or the same exercise with a lighter load. If you're doing weighted pull-ups, you can switch to bodyweight pull-ups or chin-ups, and if you feel no pain during these, you're all set. However, if you continue to feel pain in the same area no matter which exercise you're doing, you may be injured. The second injury prevention mechanism is warming up. This is because warming up physically warms up the tissues of your body, making them less likely to snap. Just like a cold piece of steel is more fragile than a warm piece of steel, cold tissues are more fragile than warm tissues. Another benefit of warming up is that it lets you practice the technique of the exercise before your working sets, which can improve your performance in the following sets. But how exactly should you warm up? By progressively increasing the load of the exercise until you get to your working weight. The easiest way to illustrate this is with the bench press. You'll start by just bench pressing the bar and then progressively increasing the weight until you get to your working weight. The same logic applies to bodyweight exercises. Start with a very easy progression of the exercise you're about to do and work your way up to your current progression. Keep in mind that these warm-up sets shouldn't be difficult, otherwise you'll tire yourself out. Your goal here is to just warm up the structures that are necessary for executing the exercise. For more information on how to warm up specifically for calisthenics, check out this video. The third injury prevention mechanism is load management. Load is how much weight you're lifting, and since heavy loads impose really high forces on your body, you need to learn how to manage them. The first principle of load management is to never use more load than is necessary. This means that if your goal is to build muscle, you should use the load that's necessary for you to stay in the 5 to 30 rep range. For strength, this would be the 3 to 6 rep range. Anything heavier than that is simply not necessary, since heavier sets of less reps are more fatiguing, come with a higher risk of injury, and aren't much more stimulative. The second principle of load management is to always increase the load slowly. A sudden increase in load is one of the biggest reasons people get injured because their body is simply not ready to handle it. If you did dips with 10 pounds this week and are thinking about doing dips with 40 pounds next week, you're simply begging for an injury. If you want to increase the load, do it slowly. There's no rush. Your body will get stronger at the rate that it decides is the best for it, and trying to speed it up is counterproductive. The fourth injury prevention mechanism is volume management. Volume is the amount of work that you do, and since doing a lot of work increases your risk of injury, you need to learn how to manage it. The first principle of volume management is to start small. When choosing your training volume, err on the side of less, which can mean just 2 to 3 sets per muscle group per session. Starting small is essential if you're coming back from a recovery period like a deload, since a lot of injuries happen when there's a crazy elevation in training volume. Just like you can always pour more milk in a glass, you can always add more volume if necessary. But once you've poured in too much, you have to clean up the mess, which in the best case scenario is excessive fatigue, and in the worst case scenario is an injury. Your minimum effective volume is oftentimes much lower than you think, so you don't need to annihilate yourself to make progress. Just 8 sets per muscle group per week might be enough to make great progress in the beginning, and as you become accustomed to this training volume, you can slowly increase it, which is the second principle. The second principle of volume management is to always increase the volume slowly. As I mentioned before, huge increases in volume come with a high risk of injury because your body is not used to processing that much stress. If you're recovering very well and you don't really feel challenged by your current training volume, increase it, but do it slowly. Don't add 3 sets at once because that can be too much and may result in an injury. Start by just adding 1 set, and if that still feels easy, you can always add another. Although you may not get injured, you don't want to be in a position where you've increased your volume so much that you're still sore for the next session, because that increases your risk of injury by itself, not to mention that session is not going to be very productive as well. And the third principle of volume management is to never exceed your maximum recoverable volume for more than a week. Maximum recoverable volume is the most volume that you can recover from, and exceeding it increases your risk of injury. If you're so fatigued that your strength flatlines or even declines for a week, take a deload to decrease your fatigue. There's no point in continuing to work out if you're unable to apply progressive overload due to excessive fatigue. You get no bonus points for doing more than your body can physically recover from, other than excessive fatigue and a high risk of injury. And the fifth injury prevention mechanism is fatigue management. Fatigue is the disruption to body system that occurs with all stimulative training, so learning how to manage it is essential. But before we get into fatigue management, let's distinguish 2 types of fatigue: acute fatigue and cumulative fatigue. Acute fatigue is the fatigue caused by a single workout, which is good because it shows that the workout was stimulative. Cumulative fatigue, on the other hand, is the fatigue that accumulates over weeks of hard training. Think of it like this: during a workout, you accumulate fatigue, and during the rest period until your next workout, you drop 95% of the fatigue that you accumulated. The 5% that's still left stays until the next workout, which turns into 10% in the next workout and 15% in the one after that. After weeks of hard training, your cumulative fatigue is so high that it prevents you from training hard and increases your risk of injury, which is when we need to bring it down by applying fatigue management strategies. But how do you know if your fatigue level is too high? By looking at your performance. If after weeks of hard training your performance stalls and then declines, you're for sure really fatigued. This is what we discussed in the volume section. If you've hit your MRV and are physically unable to apply progressive overload due to excessive fatigue, you need to call it quits and take a recovery period. There's no point in continuing to train because it will result in you simply getting weaker and possibly even injured. Once you figure out that your fatigue level is too high, you need to bring it down. But how do you do that? By taking a deload. This is a recovery period that lasts for a week, and its purpose is to drop as much fatigue and as little fitness as possible by reducing your training volume, intensity, and relative effort. For more information on how to take deloads, check out this video. Now let's talk about how to know when pain means stop. This is important to discuss because since pain is a psychological phenomenon, it isn't always indicative of an impending or recurring injury. It can also be a whole lot of nothing. To figure out if pain is actually telling you that you're at a risk of injury, here's 3 signs that you need to look for. The first is that the pain is in a small specific area, usually in the tendon or joint area. If you're experiencing pain throughout the whole muscle, it's almost certainly not an injury. It's just lactate accumulation that's really uncomfortable, so don't mistake the two. The second is that it onsets suddenly, especially if you hear something pop. If you're doing pull-ups and you feel your elbow suddenly pop with excruciating pain on top of that, it doesn't take a scientist to figure out that you should probably stop. And the third, which is the most important one, is that it gets worse with each rep. If you feel slight pain during an exercise, do a few more reps. If the pain becomes increasingly worse with each rep that follows, you should stop the set and alter your technique or try a different exercise. If the pain still gets worse, you may be injured. On the other hand, if the pain doesn't become worse or even subsides with each rep that follows, you can continue working out. Now that we're done with the injury prevention mechanisms, let's talk about what to do if an injury does occur, because even though you can reduce the likelihood of you getting injured by a large margin, the possibility of you getting injured will still remain, as unfortunate that is. Firstly, most importantly, stop doing whatever hurts you. If you hurt your shoulder when doing push-ups, don't do push-ups. Super obvious stuff. Secondly, if the injury is really bad, seek medical attention. But if it's not, take a couple of days off. Thirdly, when you get back to training, start training the injured area with very high reps, about 30, and focus on increasing your range of motion, staying far away from failure. This is because as you injure something, your range of motion will be very limited, so your top priority is to regain full range of motion. Fourthly, after you've regained full range of motion, start training the injured area in the 20 to 30 rep range closest to failure. This will stimulate muscle growth, but it won't be so intense as to possibly injure you again. Fifthly, slowly add load to get into the 10 to 20 rep range, implementing pauses and very slow eccentrics to minimize the risk of injury. Sixthly, resume normal training, but ease into warm-ups and heavier loads very slowly. Focus on pauses and slow eccentrics more than usually, and be aware of the previously injured area when training. And eighthly, resume normal training completely. Depending on the injury, this whole process may take a few days or more than a year, so it's impossible for me to tell you how much time you should spend in each phase. All I can tell you is that you should move on to the next phase only when you're experiencing absolutely no pain in the current one. If you are, you're not ready. Trying to speed up this process will only lead to another injury. This entire video can be summarized in one sentence: don't be an idiot. 99% of injuries occur because people simply stop using their common sense and do shit that their body can't handle. Of course, you can still get injured even if you're very careful, but the probability that you will is much lower than if you weren't. If you're wondering where I got all of this information, click on the first link in the description. It'll take you to an unlisted playlist about Renaissance periodization that's called Injury Prevention Made Simple. This is an amazing course on how to prevent injuries, and making this video helped me tremendously in understanding the material covered on a deeper level. I hope that this video helped you just as much as it helped me, and if you're interested in learning about injury prevention in more detail, definitely check out this course. To be honest, I have no idea why it's enlisted. This material should be available to everyone who wants to get stronger and bigger, which is one of the reasons why I decided to make this video. If you found this video helpful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and comment down below what kind of videos you would like to see from me more. You can also check the description for the best 9 bodyweight exercises for beginners and my Instagram, where I post my workouts and lifestyle in general. And have an awesome day. Peace!